And now we will turn our attention to another calamity and disaster, the massacres of 1890s. Our speaker will be Emre Can Dağlıoğlu, who received his bachelor's degree in business from Middle East Technical University in Ankara in 2009, and who wisely decided not to go on in that field, but to turn to history. And he is currently a doctoral candidate of Holocaust and Genocide Studies at Clark University, and has been working on relations between reform and massacre in the 1890s. Emre will speak about the consequences of 1895 Van massacre, the Aghtamar Patriarch Khatchadur III's report. Emre.
Merhabalar. Önce kısa bir teşekkür.
Hello. First of all, I'd like to start with a round of short thanks. Of course, to the organizers of this conference in the first place for giving me this opportunity to be here. And then, if it wasn't for the help of 3 people, then I would not be able to make this presentation. Tamar Nalcı, Yektan Türk Yılmaz, and George Adjaya are these 3 names. I owe them a great thanks. Now, this document, which was the subject of this presentation, was something I encountered in the Gergerian archives when I was doing indexing. So I'd like to thank my dear professor, Mr. Taner Akçam, for giving me this opportunity to make use of these documents in my presentation. Well, although I'll be speaking about 1895 in particular, still this time period is large enough to contain all the background of 19th century changes, actually. One of the biggest notions of that is the centralization efforts of the Ottoman Empire. So they're trying to gain strength over the suburbs, over the rural area, which influences the Armenian Patriarchate as well. In 1840s, the Armenian Patriarchate, no longer has tax exemption, and this is why it had to get reorganized. And for the Patriarchy, the only way to overcome this economic burden was to also centralize the church management and to make money from the churches in the provinces. However, a similar problem would be experienced by the Patriarchy as well, and the already existing political divide would further increase. So the biggest problem was between the Istanbul Armenian Patriarchy and the Aghtamar and Sis Catholicos offices. Catholicos offices were already, religiously speaking, above Istanbul, but still politically they were under the management of the Patriarchy. In the 19th century, since Istanbul wanted to get more centralized, the Aghtamar's religious superiority wanted to be also reflected in politics. And right at the heart of the struggle, starting with the 1850s, is about the Khatchadur III, which is the final Catholicos. He's right at the center of the problems of the regional political network, and in order to keep his position, he is strong enough to face Armenians with the Kurdish powers as well, even in the face of Patriarch Hrant, actually. We're talking of such a person. And during this process, Khatchadur's, when he is the Catholicos, Aghtamar is no longer a value for Istanbul, for the Patriarchate, and turns to be a burden. Well, speaking about the Catholicos, information about what this is. The Cathedral of the Holy Cross on the Aghtamar Island was built by King Gagik at the beginning of the 10th century, and Catholicos' 5th Hovannes uses the turmoil to leave the region and settles in Aghtamar. So it is seen as the throne of the Krikor Lusavoric for some time, and finally it is taken to Klikya. So when this is happening, Aghtamar continues his presence as the Catholicos, but only later will it go independent. In 1540, it became independent in 1113. In 1540, Aghtamar turns into a site with 14 episcopal regions. And in the 19th century, again Aghtamar becomes part of the centralization efforts of Istanbul, and this is why they will no longer need a permission. Therefore, you will no longer need the approval of the center. So after Khatchadur III passes away at the end of 1895, the Catholicos position still continues, but it is null and void. And the Vice Catholicos is undertaken by Arsen Markaryan, the chief priest Agop-Hopikyan, and the episcopal priest Osep, until 1916. In 1916, the two Catholicos positions of Sis and Aghtamar are combined, and it is now under the Istanbul Catholicos with the center of Jerusalem right now. So when it goes back to the old system in 1918, Aghtamar Catholicos still doesn't go back, which was already non-existent, and then this position will be a history. So Khatchadur Shiroyan, Khatchadur III, is the final Catholicos of this position. He was born in 1819 in Van as the son of an Assyrian family. In 1831, his father Shero brings him to the Aghtamar monastery and gives him to the protection of Khatchadur Mokatsi. Khatchadur stays in Aghtamar for 3 years and studies in Ecimadzin, and when Khatchadur dies, Khatchadur Shiroyan gets all his inheritance. And there's a lack of management at some point, so he has to gain leadership. During that time, the Kurdish Beys, which are in close relations with Khatchadur, this means that in the Van region, the plunders towards Armenians might comfortably be increased. But this is a time of getting rich also for Khatchadur. The Catholicos of that time, Gabriel, dies in 1857, which causes yet another gap in governance. So Khatchadur organizes an event and threatens the priests in Aghtamar that they will convert to Islam altogether. So Ecimadzin is particularly worried on this. So in 1858, he allows that Bülbül, Nightingale, Bedros becomes the Catholicos. Bedros, Khatchadur, and other clerics force to change the rules in the first opportunity and faces Istanbul very soon. However, this alliance will bring a heavy price to pay to Bedros, and in 1864, as a result of a plot where Khatchadur's name is also articulated, he will be killed by the men of Küllihan Bey from the Bedirhan tribe. Shiroyan becomes the Catholicos with the name Khatchadur III. In the 1870s and 1880s, in Van, Istanbul is no longer the center but very much the periphery. The region is being governed by Aghtamar Catholicos Khatchadur III, the clerics, Armenian elite, and the Kurdish Beys. So neither the Grand Gate of Bab Ali nor the Patriarchy will be able to intervene with that. And the English consulate reports also show that, including the governor, all top-level executives are part of a big bribery and corruption network, and is all full of decay from the top to the bottom. And many Armenians leave the region. So in the fall of 1895, when there's a huge violence in the western geography of the Ottomans, Khatchadur thought his relations, his strong connections would protect him. However, it wasn't as he expected it to be. On October the 7th, there was a huge violence in Trabzon, and Haydaran tribe, Emin Bey from the Haydaran tribe, the Hamidiye regiments and the local people attack 15 Armenian villages 2 days long and confiscate the Armenians' goods and animals. The violence will then also spread to the city center and also go to Van later on. The massacres continue in various dimensions until August 1896. Khatchadur asks for help to the Bedirhan tribe, with whom he's close with, but still Küllihan Bey will prefer to plunder all the Armenian villages in Vostan, in Erciş. And another narrative, it is said that Küllihan Bey has himself devastated 18 Armenian villages himself. Aghtamar is not really influenced by the violence in 1895 because the Kurdish Murtula Bey protects the island, but the Kurds from Mukuz that go to the island at the end of 1895, they shoot at the front facade of the monastery. And although they don't do anything to the priests there, the library is plundered and the manuscripts are all devastated. So it is said that Khatchadur was really sad in the last years of his life. And just like this letter suggests, each and every day he was many people who were naked and who were tortured went to the holy altar at the holy cathedral in Aghtamar. And although we had a strong will against this huge calamity, we always feel deprived in consoling the people who come to us. So this report is written by Khatchadur on 19th December 1895, and only 3 days later he dies. Khatchadur talks about how surprised and how appalled he is at the dimensions of the violence that he has witnessed. Thousands of innocent people have been brutally killed, and almost everywhere we have seen the scenes of the Christians being killed, just like in the first centuries of Christianity. And the Armenian people have never seen such a desolation before, and no such violence was ever, no such atrocity was ever committed against them. And some clerics even had to deny their faith and had to sign a marriage document to show that this denial was sincere. Khatchadur also says that he's writing these reports down just to so that what is done is remembered, and his target audience are the large peoples in Europe and his religious brothers and sisters. And here's how Khatchadur summarizes what has happened. The unarmed and obeying people were killed in the most brutal ways. The lands and the cities were burnt down, and the small fires most often turned to big fires and destroyed everything. Women and girls were dirtied, and many boys stayed orphans. Those who could run away went to the caves and on the zeniths of the mountains, or migrated to foreign countries. Khatchadur also gives important information about population. Khatchadur also talks about other districts of Van in the report. And as of December 1895, he also gives the number of people who have died for every village. So probably 1,360 Armenians lost their lives in these massacres. And a report written towards Europe, it might be thought that Khatchadur tends to exaggerate these numbers. However, when we look at Kevorkian's numbers, which were healthy even, Khatchadur's numbers are rather low, which gives us the opportunity that he probably wasn't exaggerating, because Kevorkian's numbers are higher, actually. And also with General Maevski's statistical data, there is not a huge divide neither, so probably Khatchadur did not exaggerate the number. And another important point that needs to be mentioned is about the assaults on the religious identity. In 1895-1896 massacres, it is seen that many Armenians converted. And this wasn't seen in a positive light by other Armenians, but still it is said that people had to do this. And Khatchadur also says that during the massacres, this has also happened in Van. 58 Armenian households were converted to Islam, and as an addition to this, in districts called Mamerdang and Shadak, a very overwhelming majority of the Armenian population converted to Islam. And Khatchadur also says that 35 Armenian women at least were confiscated. And it's also said that the clerics were targeted in the report. Sırp Azavadzin, the monastery's priest, Garabet, and the other priest of Garavak, Hovannes, convert to Muslim, and to prove this, they have to marry 2 women. Clerics are also very much the target of torture and killings. 10 priests are killed, 20 monasteries are plundered, and many churches are turned into mosques. Now, the final point I'd like to talk about Khatchadur's report are the identities of the perpetrators. When we look at the list of names for some districts, we see that the primary perpetrators of the killings in Van are very clearly the tribe's headsmen and also the villagers working for them. You have some Hamidiye regiment commanders like Emin Bey, and also people like Hanutsor, Shakir from Hanutsor or Teyfur Bey, who have refrained from taking part in the Hamidiye regiments. And Khatchadur says that in some places the state officials were in charge of the killings and the plunders. For Rishtun Yats, it was police officers Abdulhamid and Abdul Jafer, and for Pesantasht, it was Zabit Bey. After 1895 and 96, after all this violence, Aghtamar Catholicos is a burden for Istanbul, and for the Armenian representatives it becomes the memoir of the old order. So this is why it goes into the dusty pages of history. Sultan Abdulhamid, after 1895, takes the approval of the Patriarchy as well, and does not permit or approve of anyone who would become the Catholicos of Aghtamar. And the Catholicos can by no means object to this. And before 10 years pass even after this killing, Deputy Catholicos Arsen is killed on the Aghtamar island by Ishhan, who is the most significant leaders of the Dashnaks in Van. So, as a result, Khatchadur himself and his being the Catholicos play a very important historical role. His story shows that the abolishment of the Catholicos was not simply linked with the massacres of 1895 to 96. So this wasn't only with the decision of the Sultan, or it did not only have something to do with the Hamidiye regiments. And the massacres of 1895 to 96 are usually shadowed by the genocide. But this is important to understand, particularly to make more sense of the transformation of the Armenian identity, to realize the diversity, and to understand about the before and after of the power structure in the region. Thank you.